Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Very welcome to this evening. We had a little delay because of our special guest of tonight, Mr. Orlando, the mayor of Palermo, but he's here. Great. Thank you. Mr. Orlando, do relax. You have a lot of time. You will give your lecture at the end of this program. So just listen to all the presentations.
No, I will speak, don't worry. I'm sorry, I arrived just in delay because I'm not a special guest. But we will have a special guest in Palermo, the Pope Francis. So I was obliged to wait the meeting until 1 o'clock this morning to arrange the visit of the Pope. Now everything is okay, it will come.
Okay. So tonight we will talk about Palermo, the great city of Palermo in Sicily, but in particular this great Manifesto number 12. And then in particular we will discuss this atlas and the Dutch contribution to this Manifesta, the Dutch Trail. So full program, not too much time, we have to speed up. And let me introduce myself at least. I'm not a professional moderator at all. I'm sorry for that. I'm Zef Hemel. I'm a professor, oh God. Professor in urban planning at the University of Amsterdam, holding the Wiebouw chair. And my field of study is not only cities, but especially civic engagement. So what I call a kind of collective intelligence that is in every city, if only you try to find it and to activate it. And there are certain ways to do it. And my experience is that you always, I would say always, need art. But I want to know how exactly it works. So this is a great opportunity for me to dive in this subject and know everything about this atlas, this role of art at this very moment in the city of Palermo. So I haven't been in Palermo yet. I have so a bad moderator and not being there. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, right. So a lot for me to learn. Not by the way, who of you has been at Manifesta already? So that's a lot of you, almost half of you, that's great. And who has plans to go to? The other half. Gosh. And who is involved in this Manifesta project in any way? So already, well. A nice mix, I would say. So let's get started. And I would like to invite two persons now on the stage. Hedwig Fijen, the Director of Manifesta. Please come here. And also Kees de Graaf of DutchCulture, please.
Thanks, Zef, for this wonderful introduction. Dear friends, dear colleagues, dear Sindaco Orlando, welcome on this special evening on 9/11, a historical moment today, here in Pakhuis de Zwijger, where we put Manifesta 12 in all its aspects on the stage. My name, as I said, is Hedwig Fijen, and I'm founding director of Manifesta. We are happy to welcome tonight Leoluca Orlando, who, due to the visit of the Pope, he already said, was arrived a little bit late. So we decided to change the program. We will first have the Dutch component, and as Zef said, then the Palermo Atlas conceptualized by OMA in the beginning of the Biennale, and then the second part of the evening, the keynote speech by our mayor, our Sindaco, Cities in the Planetary Garden. We are also delighted to welcome 2 of the 4 creative mediators of Manifesta 12 team, Ippolito Pestellini of OMA and Bregtje van der Haak, who will both reflect upon parts of the Manifesta Biennale, how we came about, and what was this Dutch component in it. What is Manifesta? I saw some arms saying we haven't been there, we didn't see it. For those who were not part of our 25 years of history, since 1993, already 25 years ago, every 2 years, we have been exploring a new city in Europe. Not only the city and its cultural landscape, by questioning specific geopolitical issues, but also determining its dynamics. Manifesta stands for what people say an experimental, reoccurring cultural event, capable of reaching sometimes larger audiences, and at the same time keeping its critical position to reflect on the urgent social, political, and cultural realities of our time. And specifically in Palermo, that's visible. As maybe you know, Manifesta has chosen consistently rather unexpected cities. Palermo, the city of Genk in Limburg, and St. Petersburg, that reflected all Europe's ever-changing DNA and to shed new light on a world defined by changing ethical and aesthetic imperatives. The city of Palermo in Sicily, in Italy, can be considered a blueprint of the global, located at the crossroad of 3 continents. It's not a globalized city per se, but rather an incubator of different global conditions that reveals unique problematics, characters, potentialities, and making the city a very productive site for researching the conflicts and hope of the Mediterranean, where it's located, but also Europe and the world as a whole. In Palermo, Manifesta tried to investigate some of the main crises and transformations of our time. And it's not surprising that the 2 creative mediators, based temporarily in the Netherlands and permanently in the Netherlands, there is now for the first time a vast representation of also Dutch talent in this Biennale. And it's for the first time collaboration with what we call learning institutions. TU Delft was participating, the University of Utrecht, the New Institute, and through this, for the first time, we were extensively supported by many of the Dutch grants organizations. Creative industries, Stichting Doen, Amodo, Mondriaan, Prins Claus, and DutchCulture, who were supporting us this time, and to whom we are very thankful, since not so many people know, we are one of the few institutions not permanently funded by any country or any multilateral organization. So this was very helpful. What makes Manifesta so extraordinary? Is it the fact that the city of Palermo itself became the Biennale? Or is it that the 12th edition breaks with a traditional visual art model, Venice Biennale, Documenta, using a far more transdisciplinary model for the first time and implementing the concept specifically meant for the city of Palermo? Or was it the inclusion of this first-time urban research study as part of the biennial's new methodology, which was perceived by the outside world as suddenly very logic, very beneficial, very exciting for an itinerant biennial? Not only for the biennial itself, the artist, Ippo will speak about it, but also in a kind of what we call post-Manifesta legacy. What will happen in Palermo after Manifesta is leaving to our next city, Marseille? We will hear about this later. The Dutch trail it's the first time we use something like this, is an initiative of the Dutch Embassy in Rome and its cultural attaché Bas Ernst and DutchCulture, and is both part of the Manifesta Biennial program and what we call the collateral program, which is at this time very successful as a parallel, because 71 extra programs are related to the main Biennale and are located in all the different venues around the city. Why is it so successful this time? What the press is saying, that also these collateral programs are deeply implemented in the social infrastructure and the tissues of the city of Palermo. 25 years ago, Manifesta, not so many people know this, was born as a Dutch initiative at a time where walls were collapsing. 1989, the fall of the Berlin Wall. Today, new walls are being erected to defend borders and inequalities in a world which becomes more and more connected and dependent. This is what Manifesta 12 tries to make visible, and we hope to hear a lot about it tonight. I would like to invite the Director of DutchCulture, Kees de Graaf, to say something in this part of the program about why he thought the Dutch component needed to be supported. I wish you a very, very instructive and exciting evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Hester. Thank you, Zef. I will not repeat all the welcomes and the benvenuti, but one exception, of course, for the Sindaco di Palermo. Benvenuti. En ik denk dat I will also say welcome to somebody who created this space. And I'm always amazed here to be here and to see so many people, and every evening it's full. And if we talk about an important place, a space in the city where things it's happened, it's Pakhuis de Zwijger. So Egbert and Hester, it's really great, and I'm very happy to be here again. Yes, why Dutch Trail? A small explanation. We, that's Dutch culture, we do have a budget of €500,000 yearly, and it's made available by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Culture. Before, we created large-scale programs. We celebrated 400 years of friendship with Russia, with Turkey. But now we changed it, and we are very happy that now there's a budget to stimulate cross-sectoral international culture collaboration, to stimulate the collaboration between embassies, cultural actors, international and national, and also to stimulate long-lasting relations and sustainable relations. One specific thing, it should be within one of the 14 countries of the international culture policy. And of course, we were happy that Italy, it's a focal country, and we are very happy to get a proposal from the embassy and Manifesta, what is about collaboration, innovative, it's actual, it's relevant, it's community-based, it's about research. So this is the program. As an or a funding agency, we are a funding agency, but in this time we are looking for. So thank you once again to develop the program. So beyond every doubt, it's good we could finance this program. Maybe it's also good to give some other programs we will develop or we developed this year. Now we are working in Turkey on a program, Kenshi Kulturi, and that's about a whole series of collaborative programs on children culture. Or this year we also financed and developed a program around the Olympic Games in South Korea. And today I'm proud again to present Dutch Trail as a part of Manifesta, and to present also and to show the impact and the richness of not only Dutch cultural international interventions and collaboration, but that's what we're working all together. And I hope we create a bit better and a more beautiful world. I hope, and I'm sure there will be a lot of interesting talks tonight. So once again, thank you for being here and enjoy the evening.
Thank you, Kees de Graaf. Let's move on. Now, the program about the Dutch Trail. I would like to invite Bregtje van der Haak on the stage. Bregtje is journalist, producer, and you were also one of the creative curators of Manifesta, weren't you?
Yeah. Yes.
What is Dutch Trail?
That I think you should ask Hedwig. Because the way we went about organizing and choosing the participants for this edition of Manifesta, it was not at all about Dutchness or Dutch trails, frankly speaking. The way I was there is because Hedwig asked me, and the reason I accepted is because of the mayor. Because, because 2 years before I had been in the city to make a documentary for Dutch television, for VPRO Tegenlicht, about his very unique stance in Europe on migration. And as a filmmaker and journalist, I have promised myself that I will not spend 2 years without in some way engaging with what I think is the most important movement of our time, of migration. And being in Palermo was incredibly moving. It was very inspiring. And after we aired the documentary, we had incredible response. Many people were very relieved and excited to see that they were not alone in feeling that they want to welcome the other and to get to know the other instead of closing off. So I was very happy that when Hedwig asked me if I want to come back to Palermo and to be part of an interdisciplinary team with Ippo as our primus inter pares and Mirjam Varadinis, who's a visual arts curator from Zurich, and André Schacke from the Office for Political Innovation, who is a researcher and architect in New York. So then we started to meet, of course, in Palermo. We started to engage with the city. Of course, Ippo had a head start because he not only partially from there, but also because he worked on the study that we will discuss later. And we were very lucky to be still part of the process of making the study because it involved going around the city, meeting people, and most importantly, feeling free to ask questions, to knock on doors, very literally, and to see that those doors were opened for us and that we go inside. And I think our first meeting, if I recall, we said whatever is going to happen is probably going to be a very complicated process, but we want to keep that feeling also for the visitor to Manifesta, that you can knock on doors and you are welcomed. You can come in. And that also for the Palermitans, they can knock on doors and open doors that were maybe close to them in the city before. So I think we were not sure in the very complicated process of making the biennial that we would be able to keep this ideal. But I think after the opening days, we were so happy. I think there was this image of this explosion of festivities. The city was really one big stage. It was fantastic. And there were thousands of people from the city, but also from outside. And nobody could know who was from outside and who was from inside and who was what from where. And it was one big mix and one big party, and I think it was fantastic. So I really think we can say it worked, that the method worked, even though, of course, many things went wrong and there were also many shortages, but the idea of a Dutch trail is something that really, frankly, we didn't discuss, but it was part of all these other trails, like the trails like we were found in the garden, like you try to find your path. And I think it's very beautiful that we were supported by the Dutch and that they gave us the freedom to think and to meet and to find our trail without having to put signs everywhere that it was a Dutch trail or to emphasize that we were Dutch, because I mean, we didn't feel that pressure at all. And I really want to thank you for that, because it's very special, I think. In a world where everyone is asking something in return, every sponsor wants something back, I think we didn't feel that at all. So, and then, of course, the city of Palermo is, for me, the symbol of hospitality in the best sense of the word, of openness, of accueil. So I think this is what made this Manifesta, and this is why I accept it, and I think this is why it was a success, for no other reason. So now I would like to invite an Iranian lady to the stage. I want to present two projects that are in some way Dutch, but not Dutch. And the first one would be, please, Fariba. Fariba Derakshani. Very, would you like to sit down? Oui, yeah. Pas de problème. Fariba is head of the award of the Prince at the Prince Claus Fund, and when I heard that we would have the opportunity to work in Palermo, I immediately thought of one mythical project that I had never seen, but that I knew that Fariba had been part of. It's called, we call it the Sahel Opera, but it's really called Binto Were. It's a mythical opera that has been staged only really once in its entirety.
Not really, it's even more, but I can say it later.
Yes, maybe you can tell me what is Binto Were and why is it related to Palermo? When we don't talk about Palermo, why do we think of Binto Were immediately?
I think it was very important to say that this was a Sahel Opera was a very special project, one of our biggest projects of the Prince Claus Fund, and it was the wish of the Prince himself to have an opera made by the people from Africa for African people. So we had it started in 2004. Different people were invited to talk about this opera, to make this. All the musicians, the libretto is written by Kosi Lomko and Waziz Diop. And it was very special. We were honored to have this in Mali with Bamako. It was a very long project. About 80 people were in it, speaking. The whole opera was from 8 different languages in the original version.
And maybe I can add that the original idea for the opera, I think, came from Prince Claus.
That's the most important.
Princess Beatrice, because I think partially he was raised by African nannies.
I think the most important is to honor the people from Africa with their music, with the love of music. I think the Prince was his vision was very important to have everybody bring them up at the best thing they can do. So I think we all know that music and Africans and the voices and everything is fabulous. And this libretto of this was about migration, actually, which is very, very something that was written in 2004 and has never been more actual right now. So this was, I think, the story of it when it started.
Yes, so this opera, the story is about a woman.
I think the story is very important to say, very short, the story about Binto Were, who is a girl who was going with some other people trying to cross the borders to come to Europe from Malia and what happens, she gets pregnant, and nobody knows who's the father of this child, and it becomes a moment that you can see later that she decides to have the child back in Africa and not to have it in Europe. So that's the whole story. So migration is all about the smugglers trying to get them out. Everybody thinks life is much better in Europe, and it becomes a moment that she decides, no, it's much better to stay in Africa, because of all the wonderful things that they have there. I think that's the story, saying it in a very short, one-cap sentence. But I think it's one of the most beautiful operas that was produced, done outside in the open air in 2007.
So that's 10 years ago. Then there was a beautiful film made on opera, on this specific opera by Mantia Diawara, the Malian filmmaker. And you were initiator, co-producer, producer of that film with Mantia.
Yes, I think it's very good to say this was a story because the opera was a very big and dramatic things that happened. Winter, which is the wonderful person who is not the main character, was a girl who had an accident and passed away in reality a few years ago. And after this wonderful time in Bamako, it was produced for the Holland Festival. It came the whole opera with all the people came here to the Netherlands, and then later went to Châtelet. So it has been, and then had the African tour. But after, it was very difficult to keep this going because you can't have the 70 people from different countries all together. So this was an idea. Mantia Diawara said, Fariba, he was with us when we had the original party. I have this film here. And Documenta has asked me to make a film. And we thought, Mantia migration is the moment to talk about it. And we always wanted to make this alive, to keep this opera alive. How do we keep it alive? And I think a film is one of the best ways. So we try to...
Well, a film is not alive. So
No,
when I
mean,
saw the film,
memory.
I thought we want to have this in Palermo
And we
with
thought, what a
the
good
best
idea.
singers that we can find in Palermo. That's very complicated. To make a long story short, you came, Hedwig, everyone rallied to try to make it possible. It's not easy to produce an opera.
In a very short time.
In Palermo.
In
the
Teatro
Massimo, the most beautiful theater you can imagine.
Of course, nobody thinking that these people can have an opera. What are we talking about? So we had 2 original singers from the opera. And the rest were all found there. It was, with the local people, local chorus, the migrants who were very important to be a part of it. It was rewritten by, not rewritten.
The libretto was rewritten?
By Vaziz Diop, the original person. He didn't rewrite it, he just made it much shorter because we only had an hour and our budget was very short. We are very happy that some of our friends helped. Prince Claus still had a little money left and others helped, I think, to make it possible. And Teatro Massimo, I will thank never acting without a mayor, it would have been happening because it's such a bureaucratic, difficult way, to be honest, to get somewhere there. Thank you again for telling them we should have an opera there because...
So on the opening night, it was performed. What do you retain from that night? Because it's a beautiful theater.
Yes, to be honest,
the performance was very moving. Many people, tears in their eyes. It was a very mixed crowd. Many migrants were also in the theater and enjoying both on the stage and in the performance.
I think it's really, honestly, to say that, of course, I was there for a week before to be with everybody, to see what's going on. It was not easy to work with really non-professionals and try to have something, especially if we know so many important people are coming. But the effect of it, I think, was very moving, very touching, because it was not the quality of an opera maybe that we would expect. But what could we do? We just practiced half day on stage, and nobody anywhere in the world can do a half day on stage with people who are not professionals and think it's going to be. But I think the effect of it, the effect of it at the end, and why was it? Because it was from the people. It was not, in a white cube. Let's have everybody who was sitting there. Half of the people, which was really very, very nice, were people, the migrants there. I think that made it very special. And when these kids that were so shy, and I saw them the first day when we were doing the practice, I told them, don't speaking the language, everybody speaks another language. If you told them, don't be afraid. And at the end, when you saw them walking through the soul with their things they had their heads high up. And I think that's the most important. And for everybody, it was moving because of the way it was. I think we have to, again, thank everybody. And all these people were sitting outside because it was totally full, filled with people. Yeah. So I think that gives maybe it was not the best quality. Some things went wrong. I'm sure we don't want to have the critics about that. But to be honest, I think everybody felt the power of this beauty of the story, especially to tell the migrants that there is hope. They give them hope because there were 2 singers who were really professionals. And the kids really thought, maybe we could sing. Maybe we could become somebody. So I think that's...
And I think this is a very good example of one of the projects that is a typical project for this Manifesta, because it was entirely developed with the city, with the Teatro Massimo, with Oscar Piso, who was very engaged from the beginning. And this is what happened with a lot of the ideas we had. If there was someone who would take it on and who was responsive and who would say, I like this idea, I can make it mine, then it would work. If we didn't find that person in the city, we dropped the idea. So thank you very much for engaging on this journey with Oscar Piso.
Thank you so
giving
much.
us this beautiful opera for the opening night. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Then I would like to invite Richard Fijen. This totally different project, maybe a little more Dutch. You're information designer. Richard is one of the artists, the designers. I don't know, now I should probably say artist after Manifesta. But you call yourself information designer, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Can you say why?
Well, I'm interested in sort of visualizing the invisible networks that we talked about a lot in the context of Manifesta. That are surrounding us, especially I think in this modern age we are surrounded by all kinds of technological infrastructure like radio and Wi-Fi and data, and it's all around us. And in my practice I'm interested in trying to imagine what that could look like and trying to relate to it by making it visual. Mm-hmm. So that is what I do in my sort of day-to-day work, and in this case, of course, you invited me to propose a work for Manifesta in Palermo, and I had the opportunity to visit the city and look at some of the venues that were considered, and
read the atlas.
Did you read the atlas, of course. That was also very important for me, and being in this totally sort of different environment from where my work normally takes place. I normally make work for exhibition spaces. You could call them white cubes, but rather abstract, general places that refer to global networks. So this is all quite abstract. And in Palermo, I was given a tour of the venues, and I saw these romantic palaces with ceiling paintings, and some of them had windows, some of them did not. And it was really a feeling of entering a space that was normally off limits. And
yes.
It felt very special to be there.
It was.
Yeah. And I was looking at these paintings, and many of them are painted in this sort of romantic style where the painting seems to continue the architecture, as if there is a sort of hole in the roof and you see some sort of transition between the wall and the sky, and then you see clouds and angels and stories. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to try and make a contemporary ceiling painting where you would be able to see or to imagine the contemporary sky above Palermo as if there were a hole in the roof, and you would look through it and see all the data that is in the sky because of the Wi-Fi networks and the airplanes. And
which data?
well, I tried to gather sort of interesting sources. I started to work with data from a weather station on Sicily that told me things about the air composition. So there's all kinds of particles in the air that are caused by people living there, like sometimes pollution, but also ozone and different sort of composition that I could visualize.
You see the airplanes passing over?
There's airplanes, there's the magnetic charge of the sky caused by cell towers throughout the city, sort of changing the magnetic composition of the sky. There's satellites as well, so there's different subjects that are visualized, and it's sort of proposed as a kind of scanning radar-like device, and with each revolution there is a new subject that repeats.
Is this a site-specific work? Of course it is, because it shows specific data of that location, but would the installation look the same in a different city?
Yes, well, for me, it's super site-specific because the whole idea of it to create this perspective was inspired by the ceiling paintings in the city and by this sort of optical illusion of creating a hole in the ceiling that is not really there. At first, I was looking at sort of projecting onto these ceilings paintings, or maybe projecting slightly below them. In the end, we were given this wonderful space that did not have any ceiling paintings, but I think could have or should have. So we were basically given this space that allowed us to create a brand new sort of ceiling painting for this space. And in that sense, architecturally, in terms of scale, it's very much site-specific. In terms of content as well, I think. You see the direction of the wind and the dust particles flowing from the Sahara Desert at some days. You see, of course, the coastline and in the cellular networks that sort of follow that. So I think in multiple senses it is a site-specific work, yes.
What has changed? What did the city change for you? What are you taking with it?
Well, I think for me it's interesting that when I come up with projects, when I make my work, I'm always working in the Netherlands in this super connected, super optimized environment where everything always works and you're angry if it doesn't. And when I was taking the work to Palermo, I realized that not all of these things are a given. The internet is not working seamlessly all the time everywhere. Okay. So it also, I mean, that's reality, yeah, of course, but it also meant for me that I had to rethink my vision of a sort of super connected world and be a little bit more nuanced about it, I guess, and try to make visualizations that reflect that reality rather than always working from a sort of Western European technological perspective.
I think that's very interesting. Thank you, that's beautiful. Thank you very much. Now I would like to ask Maaike Gouwenberg, who has been suggested to us by the Mondrian Fund, but she is completely independent, and maybe that's even why she's been suggested, because she will give her independent perspective on the Dutch contributions, the Dutch trail in this manifesta. Thank you.
Okay. I'm very happy that the mayor of Palermo is here, because I was at the opening speech before the opera, and it was very inspiring because you said mobility is a right, and I thought that was very interesting for Manifesta, because Manifesta is of course in itself already a traveling biennial, and then connecting that to the Dutch trail, or how the Dutch are moving around the world, also maybe connected to Mondrian Fund, where I am connected to in relation to New Orleans, where I run a residency and always bring artists. I thought it was amazing, and to say mobility as a right, and to really focus on that in the city of Palermo. So I thought maybe I can think a little bit about the artworks that the Dutch brought in this light. And also, you said some other things. For instance, what the foreigner brings to you is what you don't know about yourself. And also how to connect to intuition. And I think in the 4 artists that I saw in Manifesta, because I was there only for a very short moment, unfortunately, and I couldn't see all the works that were there, I think they all these sayings connected very well to the artists that I saw. For instance, to start with Richard, if you look at the sky and how he connects the ceiling paintings to the sky that is above us and all the digital networks, you can totally say that this is a freedom, but it's also not, of course. I'm losing myself. So I need Bregtje here on stage, I think, to ask me some questions.
Okay, so you said you were there for a very short time.
Yeah.
How short?
Just 2 days, I think.
2 days. Okay, no, that's not so bad.
Yeah.
And were you already looking specifically for the Dutch works, or you?
No, I was there
not at
really
all.
to see Manifesta and to see it in the light of Palermo, and to be there and to just see what was going on. But there I see the work of Patricia Kerstenhout, and I think it's very interesting how she connects these souls to the history of slavery and the people in the Caribbean that didn't eat salt because they wanted to fly home, which also connects again to this idea of mobility. And I think it's a very nice idea that you take the salt and then you bring it maybe back to the Netherlands if you talk about the Dutch trail, to keep it in the Dutch light, you know.
Were you able to see other performances?
I saw the opera outside. And I actually think it was really good to have it outside, because this is, if you talk about like having the city for everyone and having a place in the city, I thought it's very interesting that how do you present art in a city that's really the city becomes part of it, not only as participant, but also as kind of just running into it. Or if you say it's for everyone and everyone has the right to be here and everyone becomes a I can never say it, part of Palermo, a citizen of Palermo, even if you're there for 1 day. I thought to present the opera on the square was one of the strongest choices to do, because then everyone who was there, who didn't know even about Manifesta, who doesn't know about art, just is sitting in the square, could see this. And I think that was really, really a strong point.
Now, next edition will be Marseille. Are there any recommendations? Anything we can learn that maybe also went wrong?
I don't know what went wrong so much.
Or what you like to repeat?
I think
there?
it's what I felt in Manifesta in Palermo was that there was really a connection with the city, and I would definitely continue that. And as Hedwig already said, that this is like the first time that there's this atlas, and that there's this longer research, and that there's really the aim to connect for a longer time to the city. I think that's very important, to make the people that live in the city and work in the city really part of what's happening.
Well, I think we can spend maybe more time on the atlas to learn more about that process. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Look forward to the next part. Thank you.
So I think it's time for a short film. You were going to see, I think it's 4 minutes film about this Manifesta 12th edition. So I think we all should go, shouldn't we? I would like to continue this evening with discussion on the methodology of working with an atlas, an architectural atlas. No, it's not architecture, it's far more than that. And I would like to invite the editor-in-chief of this atlas on Palermo, Ippolito Pestellini. Please, come here. Yeah. Do you want to sit down? No, just stand, but then let's stand over here. Okay. I think it's really exciting to read this atlas. It's so kaleidoscopic, so rich. Was it difficult to produce this atlas?
It was difficult and easy at the same time, in the sense that we approach Palermo from a very, so to say, humble point of view.
And who is we?
We, it's myself, the office, and the people, colleagues and friends I work with.
How many were there?
From us, from our team, me plus 4 people. But then it is important to actually say since the start that this project was not made in isolation. I mean, we are authors and editors of this study, but it was made in collaboration with a very vast network of friends, or people who became friends eventually in Palermo, who literally walked us around the city to discover relevant fragments of their city, either because they were important historically or socially, or because they were very contested area of Palermo. So it is something that starts from gathering stories on the ground and supporting those stories with data and research. But it really starts from, as Bregtje was mentioning before, from walking across the city.
So how many people were involved? How many people contributed to your atlas?
Overall, almost 100.
Almost 100.
Yeah.
And you started with 5-6 people?
Well, we started immediately with trying to actually establish a network of people who could actually tell us something interesting about Palermo beyond the usual cliches. The point is that the atlas, I think it's more than anything else, it's a point of view on the city. It's a scan of of what defines the contemporary Palermo. But it's also a tool of mediation between the city and Manifesta, because through the Atlas we established a network of collaborations which became instrumental to develop the whole project, so Manifesta as a whole. So the Atlas is step 1 in a much farther and longer process.
And was your step 1 a kind of chaos? That you didn't know what chapters there would be? Was it like that? Or did you work on a very rational way or a very practical way? I would say that this atlas will gonna have 9 chapters. And of course we will write 1 chapter about migration and 1 chapter about tourism, etc.
Well, I mean, it's a combination of both. I mean, you enter into a city and you have to discover your way around, but of course you start from having a point of view on that city. For us, the point of view was to basically abandon the definition of a city per se and actually treat Palermo as a geography of flows. Flows of people, of course, which are migrants, but also tourists. Flows of data, of goods, of illegal trafficking, but also species, animals, seeds. So we sort of took that point of view to actually detect in the city how these flows, which are basically concerned with a geography which expands much more beyond the Mediterranean, are actually reshaping the city per se. And the way these flows are actually intercepting and reshaping the cities is something that we found walking around, asking people, finding places.
Yeah, because the last part of your atlas, it's just journeys. It's walking through the city with citizens.
Yeah, exactly. And in a way, you could say basically that the Atlas set the basis of the curatorial project by extracting from the city why the city is relevant today globally, so why we can talk about the world through the lens of Palermo, but also it defines a series of locations of interest. It also helped to define the way we wanted to organize the biennial across the city, because it's intercepting the city in its entirety, from the outskirts to the center, till the southern toxic coast. So there was an attempt which was set, I think, in terms of ambition during the phase of exploration of the city, to actually use the biennial as a device to bring people around the city.
Okay. Okay. Is it an approach that you could use in any city? So not just Palermo in particular, but...
I will answer also yes and no. Some things are very specific, and some things I think are part of a general methodology that you can apply eventually. I think maybe it's important it was important for us to try to not to use traditional urban categories, traditional architectural categories. So we looked into...
Why not? Because it doesn't work?
No, because it works, but when I was asked by Hedwig to develop an urban study, there was a danger to turn it into a sort of master plan, or a proto-master plan, or turn the biennial into basically a meta-urban study for the development of the city. And that is something that I personally wanted to avoid because of the history of Palermo, but because in a way, in a city that has so many layers, which are coming all together in a very complex way, the best thing that maybe you can do is to actually produce knowledge about the city that the city can actually use on a longer term. And in order to do that, for us it was important to actually maybe shift slightly the perspective and ask not architects, but filmmakers about the city, to actually mobilize literature, personal memories, private archives, larger scale, let's say, analyses that looked at Palermo as a point in a network of flows of planetary scale. So to constantly, in a way, wrong foot the typical expectation of an architect.
All right. But don't you lose focus by doing this? It was a bit my experience by reading this atlas. It has not really a focus, has it?
Well, I think its focus has been developed through what happened afterwards, in the sense that the atlas has served to identify a number of key points in the city, for example, that then through the mobilization of participants that we have invited have been developed into actual reflections and projects about the city. Some of these projects were research-based, some of these projects were kind of urban interventions, which we called in the atlas prototypes. So things which have a small scale, but they set up in a certain point in a city a methodology that can be replicable or scalable.
So it was in the process of producing this atlas, you got all those projects.
In the process of producing the atlas, we identified those places which then became either locations for the exhibitions or places in which we could implement certain urban interventions.
Mm. And was this because of the help of the four creative intermediaries?
It was certainly part of that negotiation, obviously. I mean, the reason why Bregtje said it before, we, of course, were editor-in-chief of this atlas. So we conducted the research. We sort of tried to link the research to people that could help us from Palermo. But we had a very organic dialogue with my three colleagues through the process of developing the atlas.
Okay, they were already in charge at that moment when you were producing the atlas.
They were involved in the development of the atlas. We walked together through the city and sort of looking for, let's say, those characters or places or topics that we wanted to extract from the city to build and structure the curatorial proposal. Mm. But imagine a place basically where, in a way, the local dimension and the global dimension are suddenly reconciled. Yeah. So you're talking about very abstract systems and abstract topics in a way that concerns the world as a whole. But then you find evidences of all those transformations in Palermo in specific spots.
Okay. It sounds like a process of discovery that, while doing this together, you discovered certain things, or what?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Yes, yeah.
Well, maybe it sounds stupid, but because the atlas looks like a very system, in a kind of way, even though it's kaleidoscopic, it's very systematic. It has chapters. It is well,
it's been turned into a book as, let's say, the biennial was unfolding. So the atlas served as an initial research, and then it basically developed into something that had a structure while developing the biennial when it was turned into a book, where we also invited more contributors to help us with text and let's say to help us contextualizing the atlas as a whole.
Okay. If you would not have done this, have been in this process, would there have been a totally different kind of manifesta?
I wouldn't know. But
yes?
okay, then. But I'm not the one who should basically answer this question.
Then we ask Bregtje, please come. So give me an example.
No, I think I also asked Richard how he used it, but I think that the great thing is that you have a head start. I mean, if you're invited, I mean, it's not only for me or Miriam or Andres, but also all of the participants, the artists, but also the filmmakers, the designers. When you get this invitation, oh, you know, Manifesta is interested in your work, do you want to come and discover the city? Okay, some people say, yes, I can come 2 days. Great. And some people say I can come 4 weeks or 4 months at the most. But I think it's absolutely great to have this research, this atlas. Of course, the atlas never has a focus, I think. That's the idea of an atlas, that it's open, it's wide open. And it's a quick scan of many, many different points in the city. And this was offered to anyone that we engaged with in conversation, both in the city and coming from outside. And this is a huge advantage. And this is what every single artist expressed to me. Oh, thank you so much. This is really helpful. Before they took the plane, they were able to look at this. So it would have been completely different.
Yeah, that's why I call it a step one into a longer process, because basically it was given as a tool to everyone who actually participated actively in the biennial.
I thought then you get a book. Okay, that's nice.
No, we didn't give a book.
It was a PDF.
Yeah.
It was not supposed to be a book. In the end, because it was so well received, we decided we're not going to have a catalog. We don't need a catalog. Let's publish the atlas.
Yeah. Let's throw it away.
Yeah.
We don't need an atlas.
No, we need the
we
atlas.
actually needed an atlas.
We don't need a catalog.
Yeah. But I think it's important to contextualize. I think it's important to contextualize also where Manifesta is coming from, and maybe that's something that Hedwig should actually explain much better than I can do. But Manifesta enters into a new city every 2 years. The complexity of a city for a biennial like Manifesta that really tries to engage with the local qualities of that city. Of each city, basically, it's an extremely complicated process. So what we did was to basically unlock some of those complexities and simply have a tool that could be used by us, but also by the artists, in order to actually develop projects in a sort of way that was very connected to the city or to the activities that were actually happening in that city. I think it's important also maybe to mention something that it's maybe me and Bregtje represents two anomalous kind of creative mediators. We don't come from the art world. Only one member of our team was coming from the art world, and this reflected basically it's in the composition of participants that we've invited. That's why the atlas was actually understood both by artists but by geographers or writers or filmmakers or investigative journalists that we invited to contribute to the biennial, and they could read in the atlas and in the explorations that they made themselves around Palermo the potentials they could actually develop through their own projects.
And I think, if I may add to this, I think the Atlas is a consequence of the first 11 editions, where it was like this Manifesta is the only nomadic biennial, so the kind of research Kassel does always in Kassel, being site-specific and knowing precisely what's happening there, Venice, Manifesta needs to use different instrument methodologies. And it was a result of the discussion I had with the mayor, what position Manifesta should take in Manifesta 12 in Palermo. Not only deciphering, decoding, trying to implement, as I keep on saying, into the tissues of and the structures of society, the city, but all its social layers. Because what was so amazing, even for us in the city, because it was a pre-biennial, so a year before the curators really started, OMA started this pre-biennial research. What was so amazing about it, that also our embassy, our city hall, the Teatro Garibaldi, the fact that Manifesta should take place specifically in the Calza, that there should be a connection, which you see there at the Banda Periferia, the south and the north coast, all came from this knowledge. And what you see in other biennales, and this is where we spoke about, how can you be locally relevant and really site-specific, but also connecting to all those group and people you don't know, because he came, OMA came in contact with all kind of organizations,
yeah,
people
those who became
normally
basically
do not connect to.
Those who became basically the partners of this process as a whole. I mean, Bregtje, I think, said it before. This Manifesta was established as a partnership with the City of Palermo.
Yeah, for sure. And did it bring just not occasional networks, but really something so that you created new networks in the city?
Well, we created a network depending on, that was new and connected to every single operation or part of the project of Manifesta as a whole that we wanted to develop. So, just to make an example, through the Atlas, for example, we looked into the ways that the landscape of Palermo is actually being reshaped through the impulse of climate change. So that there are foreign farmers coming from Southeast Asia that feels more at home because of that. And Palermitans who actually feel more alienated because of that. This is a process that is called static displacement. Certain artists picked up on that and worked on that subject and turned it into a project that then was one of the 50 projects presented into Manifesta.
Okay. Yeah.
Just a tiny little comment. I think for Manifesta it's also super important to understand that we need a sort of legacy. If it's not in the format of a master plan, because I think that's too much for the period and the time frame, etc., as well as a kind of direction for a city which is so much in a transitional period, and Leoluca can very precisely explain. It's not giving answers, but I think it has, everybody who has been in Palermo understands that it gives a certain strategy, it gives a kind of direction, it gives, through the projects deriving from the Atlas and the research, and I talk about Zen, I talk about Pizzocella, I talk about Roberto Collovast's project, I talk about those projects which will survive after Manifesta, and the unique thing is, everything is done, produced, co-created, such a cliche word, co-created together with local civic organizations, political organizations, political activists, or city administration. And Leoluca, I think, is the right person to say, what is this so-called legacy? Because suddenly, Marina wrote about it, suddenly every biennial needs a legacy. Every culture project needs a legacy. I know that the city wants a legacy because we are only there for 2 years. But suddenly this legacy is a very important topic, and I think as a mayor of a city, he might be able to judge what is the legacy of something like a Palermo Atlas. Shall I pass to the mayor?
And
but what's your point of view on the Atlas?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, because you sound maybe a little bit skeptic or critical. I mean, maybe it would be nice to know.
No. I just want to know.
Yeah.
And I'm just stupid questions. I want to know how it works. And of course, legacy doesn't say me anything. So, how many people were there involved? And my last question to you would be, but I will ask you. The mayor writes in the Atlas that this Atlas touches the soul of Palermo, yeah? So, do you think he's right? And if so, what is this soul of Palermo now that you have this?
I mean, I hope he's right, obviously, but I mean, I think it's important. I think it's the Atlas as Manifesta 12 as a whole is part of a wider political vision on the city of Palermo that is based on culture, multiculturalism, integration, that is based on a very serious and strong shift in politics from the heavy heritage of crime and mafia towards a very vast participation of citizens in this project. That's why we brought the Biennial to Pizzosella or to Zen, so to the very outskirts of the city. And that's why in those outskirts, for example, we worked through methodologies which were more related to urban interventions than to artistic processes. So in that sense, I think the Atlas is certainly connected to a path that the city, or transformation that the city is experiencing in this very moment.
And you think you really were successful? And this is not a critical or cynical remark, but just a question. Were you successful? Because you don't sound very happy.
No, I am very happy. I am very happy. I am very happy. But, you know, I mean, we have been successful so far. We will see what happens after November 4th. Yeah. We will see in 5 years whether Manifesta has left and implanted those seeds of transformation in those places where we have tried to do something in the city. I think it's very early to judge that.
Okay, thank you. Good. My second guest, I would like to invite Marina. Marina Otero. Is it? Yeah. You prefer to sit? Okay. And do you want to drink any water? No.
I can wait for later.
Okay. Yeah. Good. You are the Director of Research at the Het Nieuwe Institute.
Correct.
And you also wrote a chapter in this atlas.
I did.
And I was intrigued by your chapter. I didn't know that at this very moment there are more than 200 biennales in cities in the world. And the number is growing.
For now.
So, and also you write about this change, that it's not just culture anymore, but most of them are now trying to become catalysts in social change, economic change. This is amazing, isn't it?
Well, I trace a linear history that is not that linear, but try to connect the idea of the carnival from the before the 19th century, and the transformation of the cultural institutions, how they go from the outside to the inside of the interior spaces of the institutions, and later go back to the street. And we are seeing how cultural production is more and more something that happens outside, and then is the engagement of the city that is not only happening in museums. So what you are seeing in the last years, and especially, I will argue, since the crisis, is that there are proliferating cultural initiatives that are temporary and that are trying to engage with the city and the citizens. And they are having a very short span of time, but they are looking for a long legacy, as we were saying. So even if they are happening for some months, they are expected to trigger huge transformations in terms of social, political, and economic questions. Yeah.
Okay, so and Manifesta 12 is.
It is.
What is, according to you, so special to this new approach we heard about?
Well, Hedwig was explaining that it's not yet a new or another biennial. It's the first nomadic biennial, and it's in its nature to be roving, to be itinerant. So it's in the DNA of this biennial to be, expert in engaging with cities in short time and doing it in a way that is meaningful, and not only for the participants, the people who visit the exhibitions, the artists, but also and primarily for the people who live in the city. And that's something that requires quite a lot of, intelligence and empathy to do. And it is something that happens in all the biennials, unfortunately.
Yeah, but I want to know whether Manifesta 12 is exceptional in that respect or very effective.
Well, Yes, I think I will tell you why. I think there is something extremely important and beautiful about Manifesta, and it's the relationship between the city and the work of art. That is not something in which the work of art is subjected to the spaces, as happen in many museums, or the other way around, in which the work of art totally, is the protagonist of the space. In Manifesta, there is a very interesting dialogue between the two, to the point that they don't have any meaning without each other. And what Manifesta does is not understanding the transformation of the city, as Ippo was saying, as a real estate development necessarily, but rather as a transformation of the gaze, so the way in which you see the city. So all the different transformations that, for instance, the Botanic Garden, you travel through the Botanic Garden and you don't know exactly which pieces are works of art and which are not. You have to discover them. In that act of discovery, you also discover the city. You also discover what is existing there. So you value what is already there.
Okay. Does this also hold? Yeah, you very much agree on that, I see. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But does it also hold for the citizens of Palermo?
I will say that is bringing kind of an understanding of the city as that's something that is not incomplete. So many times you will see to Palermo and there are many buildings, beautiful buildings that are in decay. I think what Manifesta does also is to render those buildings not as incomplete, but rather as spaces in itself that are full of potential, but not necessarily that potential, again, as a real estate operation. But with the very subtle interventions that the creative mediators and the artists did, they were making clear, unveiling and tapping the real value of those spaces, just with minimum means. And that was extremely valuable. So it was putting at the forefront and the legacy or the heritage of the city, as cities, which is, decadency, which is problem, with its conflicts, as something that has actually a lot of value, instead of something that has to be completely changed to equate Palermo to any other European city. And that's quite remarkable and sensitive.
Okay. And this transdisciplinary approach of this Biennial, with 4 mediators, with different backgrounds. You even call them a kind of parliament. You're really searching for new kind of institutions, and that this Manifesta might bring to the city of Palermo. Are you serious about?
I'm serious. I did my PhD on itinerant institutions, ephemeral institutions. So I really believe in the potential of this, what I call a parliament, a roving parliament. So people who gather around certain issues and go to a city and engage with the city with an act of a speech, but also different interventions, artistic, theoretical, political interventions. What surprised me is that with such a different profiles and approaches to the city, how they are still in good terms and they enjoyed it until the end, because it's quite a difficult task to put together a project, this ambitious project, and also to work together. So I compliment them for their beautiful and important work.
Okay. You were involved in one of the projects, or in general? Were you involved?
I was teaching a studio at the Royal College of Art together with Anna Punjaner and Ippolito. And actually the students used the Atlas. So they had to intervene in Palermo, and what we did at the beginning of the course was the Atlas. So they had that information. So it was not only the artists, also the students used that document to enter in the city and start learning on the city. And you can see them; they are great students. And they did different projects about very complicated topics that I don't know. I don't know. That's another thing that so many difficult, complicated questions that are present in Palermo, and yet I think all of them are treated with a lot of ethics and sensibility in the Manifesta project, even by students. So they did a series of interventions and also a parade through the city.
Okay. You know, they tell me nowadays, when you would ask artists to make art about the future, you will get kind of dystopian art in general. But it seems that this Manifesta 12 is not dystopian at all. Is it an optimistic, inspiring Manifesta?
I think it is inspiring. I'm not a very positive person, so if everything is too positive, I get bored immediately. So I think there is a criticism in the Manifesta. There is also dystopian moments, but I think what achieves is to mix very well the festive. So this idea of the carnival that I was referring before, like this idea of the festivity in which everyone participates, is not an audience and a performance, but everyone was involved. And it was, an idea of that there are very complicated projects that are difficult to tap into, but at least there was this need or this attempt to engage and to come together. So, but still there were moments that were dystopian, and I celebrate them as well.
Okay, last question. Have you any advice to Manifesta?
No, I wouldn't go there. No, I think I don't have any advice.
No?
No. Do you?
No, I'm talking to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay. Now my last guest, Mr. Orlando, please, would you come to the fore? Great. We're so happy that you are here, really, again. Very special that you give us the honor to give a speech tonight. But I want to ask you a few things before you give your speech. Right? We're talking about this legacy. It seems to me that this Manifesta event is a kind of celebration, the end of your mayorship. So you started in 1985, yes. Right? And
I was very young, don't worry.
So, in a way, it feels like this is the. Can I help you? Yes. No, they will do it over
thanks.
there.
Yep. No?
Yep.
Yes, okay, thanks.
Yes. So that it is the end, while I think it should be the beginning. What? So this legacy, I want to ask you.
The time. The time is important.
The time is important.
The time is important. And to change needs a time. I think it's the message coming from Palermo. Because we really changed it. But we changed it needing time and contrast, time and conflicts. If somebody imagines it's possible to change it soon without contrast, he says lies. He says lies. The history of Palermo, if you can say, my life is just the best demonstration that the time is important, that to change is possible. It's possible to change identity, because identity does not come from the blood of our parents. Imagine how many genocide the ius sanguinis has produced in the history of humanity. I am not Sicilian because my father and my mother were Sicilians. I am Sicilian because I decided to be Sicilian. Do you imagine what does it mean? Do you imagine what does it mean? Do you imagine how many genocide we have lived just in name of ius sanguinis? And the second is that it's possible to change identity. It's possible to change the homeland. I cannot be condemned to have as homeland the country where my father and my mother let me be born without my authorization. Because probably your parents asked their authorization. My parents were really violent. They did not ask me the authorization to be born in Italy, to be born in Sicily, to be born in Palermo. I cannot be condemned by the blood of my parents. I cannot be condemned by the place where I was born. So if you imagine that, you can imagine that I have been a city son, then I was city brother, now I am probably city father, but don't worry, I will never be city grandfather.
Okay.
Don't worry.
And did Manifesta really work in your city?
We met in a magic moment.
A magic...
A magic moment. I think that it was a magic moment for Manifesta. Because I think that Manifesta was, as every 2 years, of course, looking the direction, the way, the legacy, the legacy. And the same was Palermo. And probably we are both mature to meet. And we met in a moment that is a magic moment that, for me, has deeply changed the history of Manifesta. And for me, has deeply changed the history of Palermo. It is the real reason for which I am so happy, and I say thanks to Manifesta. And I wish to say thanks to Manifesta. I wish to say thanks to the Dutch royal family. I wish to say thanks to the Prince Claus Foundation. I wish to say thanks to all you, and just to say thanks. The Dutch flag is in the facade of City Hall since 1st June until 4th November. So if you come in Palermo, in the facade of City Hall, you can see near the Palermo flag, of course, the Italian flag, of course, the European flag, even the Dutch flag. So you will feel at home, because I think that Palermitans felt Dutch and Dutch felt Palermitans. Thanks, Manifesta.
Okay. Good. I give you the floor. Do you want to stand here? Okay.
Just I say thanks, and I should just say thanks, bye-bye. I fly back to Palermo. Because I am here just to say thanks. Just to say thanks and to try to explain why I think it is necessary for me to say thanks. But what I need is just to let you know the vision that gives just the proof how magic was the meeting between Manifesta and Palermo. The cities in the planetary garden. The cities in planetary garden means that my opinion is the development comes from mobility. The history of humanity depends from the mobility. From the will to the web. From the will to the web. The development of the humanity depends from mobility. The second, the economy is globalized. The life is globalized. The states are losing role. And the big agglomeration, urban agglomeration, are taking the place of the states. Because the only place where it's possible to have a contact point between vision and daily life is the city. If you go in the state, you don't feel this harmony between the vision and the daily life. And this is the reason for which, with some Dutch mayors too, we organized the Global Parliament of Mayors. The mayor of Rotterdam, of Amsterdam, of Den Haag. we organized the Global Parliament of Mayors, of course, including the mayor of Stockholm, the mayor of Stavanger, of Oslo, of Atlanta, of Denver, Minneapolis, Abidjan, Mombasa, Antalya, Palermo, Barcelona. We think that it's necessary to send a message that the future of humanity needs to start or to restart from the local dimension of the life. So, starting from this idea, Planetary Garden is a fantastic idea. Planetary Garden is the title of Manifesta 12. We can say Planetary Garden is the title. And the Planetary Garden is connected with a painting. You probably have seen the painting of Francesco Loiacono. Francesco Loiacono is a well-known in Italy, painter that in 1875 just described the landscape of Palermo. And in the landscape of Palermo, in this painting, no plant is autochthone. In Palermo, in Sicily, we have no autochthone plant. But we are high biodifferent. Our biodiversity does not come from the birth, remember the blood, does not come from the birth, but comes from a choice. We welcome everybody. I am so proud to live in a country, in an island, in a city without autochthone plant. Imagine the most typical Palermitan plant, is Fico d'India. That comes from India, it means from Mexico, of course. Because for Cristoforo Colombo, the Americans were Indians. But it's just a symbol of Palermo, the cactus. And I think that for this reason it's really important to remember the role of Botanic Garden in Manifesta 12 in Palermo, where the plants and the human beings just look to be the same. There is just a series of faces of the academic director of the Botanic Garden. But when you are there, you don't know if you are in front of you Mario Rossi or a plant. And when you go in the garden, you don't know if you have in front of you a plant of Mario Rossi, the director of the Botanic Garden. This confusion between human being and nature and plants is so sweet, so African, may I tell you? So African. Because we respect the nature, the landscape. With this respect, we destroy. The Africans do not respect the landscape, live together with the landscape, live together with the plants. And we wish to live together with the plants. This is just Manifesta, just like a planetary garden. The name comes from a book of a very famous French botanic, Gilles Clément. And I think that in this place, rich of plants, the mayor arrives and says that the future has a name, Google. Yes? The future has a name, Google. But I say Google and Ahmed the migrant, both. Not only Google, but even Ahmed, or Ali the migrant, or Sarah the migrant, or Luca the migrant. Just to say the future of the world is mobility. Virtual mobility, Google, oh, Alibaba. So, let's respect the China too, okay. I mean, Google or Alibaba, that is just a virtual connection, and Ahmed or Luca or Sarah, this is a human connection. To live only in a world dominated by Google is a tragedy. Because what is necessary, as I said before, is to connect mobility with the time. And Google has no respect for the time. Google has no respect for the time. To live only with Google is a tragedy. To live only with Luca the migrant probably doesn't give guarantee for the future. I mean, so we need just a combination between both. And just to say about the time, mobility is important. And we say thanks to the migrants. We in Palermo say thanks to the migrants. Because the migrants are helping Palermo. I presume that should help the world, but I speak about Palermo. Is helping Palermo to understand how old, useless are some certains. State, identity, homeland. State, I was professor of public law in the university, so I teach how important is the state. Archaeology. Archaeology, with respect for archaeology, of course. The state, so I've said for many years in university, is a closed space. Try to ask to Google what is the state. A closed space. Try to ask to Ahmed the migrant what is the space, the state. A closed space. Try to ask to a 20 years old young boy or young girl what is the state. He doesn't reply. For young people, the state does not exist. The world does exist, the village does exist. What is in the middle is the enemy of the happiness. The state is the enemy of happiness. In any case, it's necessary evil, but evil. So we say thanks to the migrants, because remember the us that the state cannot be a closed space. This doesn't matter. If somebody defends the closed space with the weapons, somebody else with the flowers. It's in any case a closed space. Identity, as I just said. Identity does not come from the blood of my parents. I'm sorry for you, but I was born in Sicily. My father and my mother were Sicilians. I was so-called the Sicilian blood. Just later, during the dinner, I will ask to some hematologist the difference between my blood and your blood. My blood, the blood of people from Pakistan, from Bangladesh. I am Sicilian because I decided to be Sicilian. Being born in Sicily, I could decide to be in 5 minutes Tunisian and Jewish or German and Hindu. You know how does the world change if identity does not come from the blood? May you imagine that in the future the art will depend from the blood? Can you imagine that in the future the art can be pure, not contaminated? If you imagine that, please call Google, not the art. And I think the same for homeland. The homeland is not the place where I was born. The homeland is the place that I decided to have as homeland. Being born in Italy, I'm free to decide to have Italy as homeland or another land. It is for Google, so. It is for Ahmed, so. It is so for everybody. If I decide to have Italy, my choice has a double value. Because it depends on my freedom. It's not a condemnation depending from the decision of my parents. Therefore, I say that there is no city, magic moment. There is no city in Europe so culturally changed in the last 40 years like Palermo. Culturally. Yes or no, somebody can say that Berlin changed. Somebody can say that Moscow changed. Somebody can say that Prague, Warsaw, Riga, Vilnius changed. But those cities changed in connection with institutional changes, with international changes. We changed without changing our constitution. We in Palermo changed in the mind. In the mind. And we have to say thanks to the people who were in fight against the mafia. And we have to say thanks to the people like I was, that was considered atheist and communist. Nobody's perfect. I've never been atheist, I'm sorry. Nobody's perfect, I've never been communist. But I was considered atheist because I was against the mafia and the Catholic bishop were mafiosi. A friend of mafia boss. I'm Catholic, so I can speak against. Okay, fine? And I was considered communist because I was against the mafia and the prime minister and the ministers who were mafiosi. And I was considered, of course, an aversive, a communist. I've never been atheist, and I've been communist. We have to say thanks to the people who died in fight against the mafia. But we have to say thanks first of all to the mafia. Yes, killed it too much. Killed it too much and obliged us to open the eyes, to open the mouth, to hear. Obliged us to change. It is the same dramatic positive result produced by Adolf Hitler in Germany. I love German. German language was my second language. My first is Sicilian, in the case. My fourth probably is Italian. I love German culture, but I think that German people, after Hitler, are much better than before. Because they discovered the contradictions of the culture, the perversion of the culture. The same is happening in the Islamic world. My Muslim friends today are better than before Islamic State. 10 years ago, my Muslim friend said, you cannot say that, you don't know us, you don't know our family, our context, our tradition, just like Palermo 30 years ago. And they produced, just so speaking, the alibi to close the eyes, to close the mouth, to close the ear. Now, when you speak with Muslims, they speak clearly because they have understood that Islamic State is the perversion of Quran, just like the Nazism is a perversion of German culture, just like the mafia, the Syrian mafia is a perversion of the Syrian culture. And we are today just in condition to say that Manifesta has given to us the possibility to let the people to be proud to be Palermitan. Because we do not have fear for people who are different. If somebody asks me how many migrants are in Palermo, I, the mayor, do not reply 100,000. I do not reply 100,000. I reply no one who lives in Palermo is Palermitan. I make no distinction between who was born in Palermo, who lives in Palermo. You know what does it mean? Just remembering the painting of Lo Iacono. The painting of Lo Iacono. The harmony just depending from the painting of Lo Iacono and the crazy mayor welcoming everybody. And last year, I was re-elected for the 6th time, the first day without ballotage, and the Salvini list, the list of the enemies of the migrants against me in Palermo 1 year ago, got 1%. 1%. May I imagine that at least 50% of one did not vote for me for the problems of traffic in the city, not for policy on migration. I mean, this Palermo is just a city that has become something like a a positive message for the rest of the world. To welcome is possible. And I think that what we try to do is to explain that one day we will have a second process of Nuremberg. Yes. Will be processed for genocide. Our parents, our grandparents could say that they did not know what was happening about the Italian-German genocide, the Nazi-fascist genocide. We will not be able to say that we did not know, because we know. My life changed many times. My life changed when I met a girl that is still today my wife. We met when we were 18 years old, so, but we are still married. And she is Sicilian. I met in the Tate Gallery in London, never met before. And she asked to me, I'm Sicilian, she's Sicilian. I am Sicilian, and asked to you, 18 years old, like I am, what do you do against the mafia? The role of the women in fight against the mafia, you can understand. The role of my wife in fight against the mafia. My life changed when on 6th January 1980, the president of the Sicilian region, Piersanti Mattarella, was killed by politicians of our party, and by mafia boss. And near the body of Piersanti were the Professor Sergio, the brother, my colleague in the university, he teaching parliamentary law, me teaching constitutional law. In the same room, in the same department, in the same faculty of law. And I was the legal advisor of Piersanti Mattarella. He was a honest man that imagined possible to change. And he was killed by members of our party. And that killing changed my life because Sergio, the brother, and Irma, the widow, obliged me to be involved in politics. They told me, you are 30 years old. You have never met the politicians who killed the Piersanti. You occupied the faculty of law when your father was the dean. Then you went to Germany to occupy the faculty of law, where the dean was not your father. You have nothing to do with the system of mafia power. You cannot accept that Piersanti will die a second time. And I'm here. Mission accomplished. The mafia does not govern the city of Palermo. The mafia still exists in Hamburg and in Palermo, in Paris and in Palermo, in London and in Palermo. But mafia does not govern the city of Palermo. The mafia is not the face of the mayor of Palermo. And the mayor of Palermo is not a mafia boss, is not a friend of a mafia boss. And when the 31st January, Sergio Mattarella, 2015, was elected president of the Italian Republic, I called and said, Sergio, mission accomplished. I have to find something else to justify my involvement in politics. And I decided not to fight only against the mafia, but to fight against the residence permit. The residence permit is new slavery, new death penalty. Because we oblige the people to sell their body to the criminals, because they have no residence permit. To walk with respect of the rights, because they have no residence permit. And I think that the message coming from Palermo is a message that to change is possible. There is a Sicilian expression saying, "Cu nasce tonno un po' morre quadrato." I have to translate into Italian. Chi nasce rotondo non può morire quadrato. Who was born round cannot die square. Wrong. Wrong. Who was born round can never die square. We hope to decide until the last moment how to die. And our legacy is that we need the time to change. The day that the mayor of Palermo, the day that the Palermitan will say, we are for the eternal present, we have no respect for the past, no hope for the future, it will be the death of our hope. We think to change is possible, and it's contrast. The populist. I close with the populist. Who is culturally populist? Culturally populist is somebody not having respect for the time. Somebody imagined it's possible to change now without contrast. The history of Palermo is alternative to the cultural populism. And be careful. The cultural populism is not a party. Is not a political position. Is a cultural perversion. That is even inside me. Inside everybody has the risk to imagine it's possible to change as soon without conflict, without contrast. And I think that the history of Palermo can be the best antidote against the populism, the cultural populism. And so I am proud to be the mayor of the city of Palermo, where Don Pino Puglisi, a priest, a Catholic priest, was born. A close friend of mine, he was killed in 1993. He was a simple priest. He only asked the school for the children in the periphery of Palermo, where now Gilles Clément is together with the girls and the boys just producing vegetable gardens, just promoting vegetable gardens. Manifesta, Gilles Clément, the gardens, in the place where a Catholic priest was killed because he asked a church for the children on the periphery of the city. And the mafia boss had more fear for the Catholic priest, the simple, poor Catholic priest, than for the weapons of police, than for the sentences of the justice court. And they killed him. And the Pope declared him martyr and beate, even to forget too many Catholic bishops who were mafiosi. Even to send a message that even the church is changing in Palermo. Because the church in Palermo was a piece of the system of criminal power. I say so because I'm Catholic. If I should be Hindu, I should not speak so. It should not be politically correct. But I am at the same time proud because we organize in Palermo the largest gay pride in the Mediterranean area. The largest gay pride. Human rights. I am not homosexual. I am not a Catholic priest. But I think that Palermo is a symbol for respect of human rights. Thanks a lot.
Questions?
Ja? Wil je dat nog doen? If there are any questions, then you have to come back. This is a great opportunity. Yeah, you flew to Amsterdam, gave a great speech. Maybe somebody in the audience wants to say something to you.
Of course.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I'll give you the mic.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you. It's been a long time since I heard real politics spoken. I've lived here for nearly 30 years, and I actually came from London when Mrs. Thatcher was destroying the city my family came from. The question I got is, if you have 140,000 people join your community, I can't imagine what would happen in Amsterdam if that was to happen. How do you accommodate them? How do you pay for them? How do you allow them to earn? What happens? How do you let them come into your city and become part of it? What's the process?
I don't understand exactly. What is the question?
So if you have so many people join the city, 140,000 people arrive quickly, how do you allow them to...
We have welcomed just in 2 years 50,000 migrants in the city of Palermo, only in the city of Palermo, only in 2 years. They arrived in the port of Palermo. I was always in the port, welcoming them. Always welcoming them as... thanks. Thanks. Vi Piero, Italiense lente, Palermo lente. Palermo lente. I mean, it is not because I am just a stupid mayor not taking care of the situation of the city. I do that because I work to let Palermo to be a safe city. Palermo today is exciting and safe. Palermo is safe because when some Muslims arrives in Palermo, it could be dangerous, it could be a terrorist. The Muslims living in Palermo call the mayor, and the mayor called the police. They defend their city before defending their religion, their homeland. It doesn't happen in the Ballet in Paris. It does happen in Ballet in Paris. My daughter lived 13 years in Paris. She does the same mistakes of the father, always with the migrants. She has said to me, she was even in Bataclan that night. She's now leaving because she refused to drink a cup of coffee. And went outside, and during the way to go outside, everything exploded. And my daughter says to me, if some migrant arrives in the Ballet in Paris that could be dangerous, nobody called the police. They close the eyes, the mouth, the ear. And some of them hope that instead of one bomb, the terrorists let explode the 2 bombs. It doesn't happen in Palermo. Palermo is a safe city because people living in Palermo feel at home. So I think that is a strategy. Is a strategy. I think that we do not need the humanitarian approach to the migrant. I am against the humanitarian approach. I am against the security approach. When I go to the doctor, I don't ask a kiss. I ask the doctor to respect my right to live. If he gives a kiss, it's better, of course. I am not against the kiss. But the migrant, oh, so nice, so sweet. No nice, no sweet. He's a human being, having human rights. Then you can kiss, if you like.
So one last question.
Good evening. I'm from Germany, art dealer from Germany.
Aus welcher Stadt kommen Sie?
From Hamburg.
Oh, Hamburg. Einzige Stadt, wo kann man Fisch essen um 4 Uhr
It's right.
am Morgen.
It's right. But I visited Palermo, I visited the Manifesta, and I tried to compare the Manifesta and the Biennale in your town with the Biennale in Venice. One detail, when you are a rich collector, you can rent a palace in Venice, you can put some artists in the palace, you can make a party, and that's it. When you are in Palermo, I visited a palace, the Palace Butera, and I met an old person there by accident, and after 1 minute he mentioned, oh, I'm the owner of this palace. And I asked, why are you the owner? What want you to do with this palace? And he mentioned, oh, I think about the future of my city. I think about the future of society, about the future of art. This was a meeting. I never had such a meeting in Venice. So I'm very optimistic about this type of strategy, of this type of nomadic biennale. So I'm proud to be here in this evening, and I'm happy to learn about the efforts of this city and the Manifesta in Palermo, and I'm impressed by your speech.
May I say thanks to you, but I wish to say that the situation is much more better because Massimo Valsecchi and Francesca, it means the owner of the palace, are not Palermitan. They decided to come to Palermo 4 years ago. They had never been in Palermo. The first time I met was 4 years ago, when the situation in the city of Palermo was on the way. Let's say on the way. Just to say, people protesting against the mayor, the traffic, no pedestrian area, no Wi-Fi free. And they came in my office in Palazzo delle Aquile. You have seen Massimo and Francesca. They are so quiet, just not exactly like I am. Just so quiet, so simple. And they arrived in my office and they told me, "It's the first time you come in Sicily, not in Palermo, in Sicily." And I told them, tomorrow Palermo will be fantastic. We are on the way to change. And down on the street, on the square, people protesting against the mayor. Palermo will be an exciting and safe city. They believe it. They bought the most magnificent palace in Italy. You have to make comparison with Palazzo Farnese, that is an embassy of France in Rome. I don't know a palace, a private palace, a family palace, just like Palazzo Butera. There's a difference. Palazzo Farnese is on the square. Palazzo Butera is on the sea. It's the difference. Just like Hamburg. And I think I can just give to you a list. He says that he's Palermitan. He speaks about his city. And imagine, he has just bought, he has just founded now the biggest private collection of art in Italy. In Palermo. And of course, Amro came from London. Of course, tomorrow I will be in Palermo because I will give the honorary citizenship of Palermo to Reinhold Wirth. That is Künzelsau in Baden-Württemberg. I can give you a list of persons. I was just in my office, I received a phone call. "Oh, I am in Palermo. I come to visit you." "Yes, I'm in the office when you come." After 2 hours, this guy called me and said, I cannot come. I am by the notary. "Okay, see you tomorrow." The day after, this guy came to me, was Krzysztof Malinowski from Poland. "And what did you do in Palermo?" "I bought an apartment. I wish to live in Ballarò." You understand? It's a revolution. And today Palermo is exciting, safe, and not expensive. Not expensive. When I will come I will go in Marseille for the inauguration of Manifesta 13, I will say, "I'm sorry for you. Palermo is exciting, safe, and expensive now."
Thank you. Thank you. And I leave the closing remarks to Ms. Hedwig Fijen. Please.
Just a final 2 words. Thank you, Sindaco Orlando. We were super proud to have been allowed to work on this magical moment, as you call it. And I'm super proud that I was allowed to work with Ippolito Pestellini from OMA, with his fantastic Palermo Atlas, which will maybe not give like the notion today, but for the future, definitely. And it will also set, because this was like the title of this evening, it will set hopefully a permanent methodology, thanks to you, thanks to your commitment, thanks to OMA, but also to Bregtje and everybody, all the artists and every participants in the Biennale. It's not over. Everybody who is now excited and inspired by Sindaco Orlando, please attend the City of Palermo either before the 4th of November or in the year after. We have the speech of Mayor Orlando here in translation, and the Palermo Atlas is of course available outside. Let's have a drink on Palermo.